Well, good morning once again. Happy Tuesday morning to you. And we've been reading from the book Betty, my first book in my Big City Dreams series. And we're in chapter 28, and this is the last chapter about Betty. And what we've learned is Betty became a foster grandmother at a psychiatric medical hospital. And she's been working with a little boy who hasn't spoken for a long time. He saw his parents killed, and he kind of went inside. So Betty has been working with him and telling him stories about her childhood. So let's see where we are in this last chapter. One day, Betty asked the administration if it would be possible to take Louie down the street to the local hamburger joint. She did get special permission, which was practically unheard of, but Betty had earned the respect of the administration. Louie was thrilled and couldn't get his jacket on fast enough. Louie and Betty held hands as they walked in the light falling snow. Louie tried to catch the snowflakes on his tongue, but it wasn't snowing hard enough for the snowflakes to stick. As Betty and Louie walked into the hamburger shop, Betty said, "Louie, let's get the hamburger specials. What do you say?" Louie had the biggest smile on his face, which Betty took to mean a big yes. Betty ordered 2 specials and found a table for her and Louie. While they were waiting for their hamburger specials, Betty said, "Louie, we have been meeting every day now for almost 6 months. I think we trust each other, am I right?" And Louie nodded yes. "I would like to know why you don't talk. Is it because you can't or don't want to?" Louie shrugged his shoulders, indicating he didn't know. "If I asked you to try to say a word, would you?" Louie just shrugged his shoulders again. Their hamburger specials came and they ate in silence. Betty watched Louie eat, and her heart was so happy to see him enjoy his burger and fries. Yet at the same time, her heart was heavy with sadness, knowing unless he talked, he would become institutionalized. When they finished, Betty asked Louie if he wanted to stop in this new pet store. And of course, just like any other 8-year-old boy, he nodded his head yes. So off they went. As they entered the pet store, Louie seemed overwhelmed with all the activity around him. It became apparent to Betty that Louie had never been in a store like this. Betty suggested that they walk around and see all the different kinds of pets people buy. Louie's head seemed to spin on his shoulders. He looked at the fish, then the birds, then the kittens. He was all over the store. All of a sudden, his eyes locked onto a small brown puppy that was in the center of the store. It was boxed in by a round fence, but the top was open. Before Betty or anyone knew, Louie reached down and picked up that puppy. He fell backwards and they both crashed to the floor. First Louie, then the puppy. Louie never let go of that puppy and brought himself to a sitting position on the floor. The puppy was wagging its tail and licking all over Louie's face. Louie started to giggle, then rolled backwards, trying to hold the puppy away from his face. Betty was smiling along with several customers who were just watching the Louie and the Brown Puppy show. All of a sudden, Betty heard, "I love you." The only one that seemed startled was Betty. Did she hear what she thought she heard? Did Louie speak? Betty walked over to Louie and said, "Louie, I think it's time to go. Let's put the puppy back now. Maybe we can come back tomorrow." Tears welled up in Louie's eyes and said, "I don't want to go back." Betty grabbed him and hugged him. "You talked. You said words," Betty said, then started to cry. Louie looked up at her and said, "I love you." She did not ask Louie any more questions and said, "I love you too, Louie." They walked back to the hospital hand in hand through the falling snow. It was coming down harder now, and it did stick to Louie's tongue. Betty felt such joy in her heart that she thought it was going to bust open. She could hardly wait to tell anyone at the hospital what just happened. When they walked into the hospital, Mr. Roberts greeted them. "Welcome back. We were worried about you two with the way the snow was coming down." Betty shared their experience at the pet store. Mr. Roberts' eyes filled with tears as he was listening to Betty. He turned to Louie and asked if he would say something. "Would you say something else?" Of course. What would you like me to say? Louie asked. Mr. Roberts just gasped, then asked, why haven't you said anything these past 2 years? I don't know, Louie said. Needless to say, there was a lot of activity around this phenomenon. Louie was bombarded by different doctors, all asking him questions. Betty was interviewed by many of the hospital staff, including some of the same doctors. Both Betty and Louie became celebrities at the hospital. Mr. Roberts suggested that Betty take a week off and rest up, as Louie will be busy with the medical team for testing. So that is what Betty did. However, she couldn't rest her mind. All she thought about was Louie. She missed him so much. Betty replayed the Louie and Puppy show at the pet store over and over in her head. Before the week was up, she received a call asking her to come in the next day. Betty became so excited and knew she couldn't spend the day alone. She called Serena, and they spent the afternoon together, with Betty sharing with what happened at the pet store. The next day, when Betty got off the bus, she walked a little more deliberately, with her head held high than ever before. She felt so good about herself for the first time in life. As soon as she walked in the door, she was approached by a young man and was escorted to the day room. Louie was sitting there with another boy and a man and a woman. There were cameras and lights all over the room. Mr. Roberts approached Betty and said, Betty, the news people are here doing a story on you and Louie. They want to ask you a few questions, but first I want you to know that Louie has undergone testing all week. Louie's cognitive abilities reported within normal range. The foster parents for Louie's brother are here and are considering fostering Louie as well. All this is happening for Louie because of you. Your love and caring nature provided the safety for Louie to come out of his shell. He has been talking up a storm all week. Betty was speechless and a bit embarrassed and proud all at the same time. The evening news reported on Betty Payson and how her loving, caring nature enabled an 8-year-old boy to speak after 2 years of silence. They interviewed her in depth about the story she told Louie and about the puppy at the pet store. Louie's background was also reported on, along with the possibility that Louie would be joining his brother with his new foster parents. Betty finally realized she did have something to offer. Even though the news reported how she helped Louie, the truth was, Louie helped her find her joy. Louie helped her find her self-worth. Louie helped her find herself. The next morning, while she was having her coffee and basking in the joy she felt for herself and Louie, she received a phone call. Good morning, Betty. I wanted you to know that Louie is going to be leaving us to join his brother, Mr. Roberts said. Oh, Mr. Roberts, that is wonderful news. Yes, we are all excited about it. Louie asked me to call you to see if you could come by before he leaves. Of course, I'll take the bus right over. Betty was excited about Louie wanting to see her, yet at the same time, Elle felt a little sadness, for she knew it was probably the last time. When Betty walked into the day room, she saw Louie and said, Louie, I am so happy for you. Louie smiled and hugged her, then said, Mrs. Payson, will you tell me one more story before I leave? Of course, Betty answered. Can we sit on our special bench? Louie asked. Betty quickly responded, Yes, let's go. It was a chilly but sunny day in Chicago. They each grabbed their jackets and snuggled up on their special bench, and Betty began. One day, I went down to the creek to get some water from my mom, and on the way back, a big black snake started to chase me. The end. Well, it's been quite a journey, story time with Joyce, and we read the whole book, Betty, and it is the first book of my series, and you can buy Betty or the other 2 books on Amazon.com. All books were written by Joyce Bennett-Hall, or you can go to my website, JoyceBennettHall.com. I will be posting a link to my YouTube channel because I will be starting to read from another book, but I'm going to be doing it on YouTube, but there will be a link, and just watch for the posting. Bye. Have a great week. Bye-bye.